Welcome to Gray Eminence Media. Let's get into it.
Scholars, almost everyone, but many have analyzed that phone call. That was a phone call made in front of, I guess, 7 or 8 lawyers. Brad Rathensberger, the head, who, by the way, last week said, I didn't do anything wrong. He said that was a negotiation. Brad Rathensberger, who I was dealing with, I appreciate that he said that, but he said last week, I didn't do anything
Let's talk
wrong.
about it so we can move on.
No,
You
no,
said
no,
in the
let
call.
me just tell you one other thing. When I spoke, I knew I was probably being taped. I didn't ask, but I knew I was probably being taped. You know, they illegally tape me because they tape me in Florida. It's a two-party state. You know that, right? So they illegally taped the call. But forget about that for a second. I knew that there were many lawyers on the phone from the other side. There were many people. There were many people on the phone. When I told them, I said the election was rigged. I said all sorts of things about the election,
And
which
they
I
told you it
believe it
wasn't.
100%.
They
No, I
told you it
believe, no, I
wasn't.
have all the facts. Look, I have all the facts. In one way, I looked for a trial because it was so dishonest, okay, so rigged, and such a dangerous thing for our country. We have to have borders and we have to have fair elections. We have neither. But
I want to talk about the border. I want to talk about the border, but we
Border, yeah, I agree. You have all kinds of migrants passing through that southern border. You literally have migrants from Asia and from West Africa choosing a route to go specifically to the southern border of the United States, Mexico, and trying to illegally enter from that route. So it's very clear that, I mean, even if you are more liberal on this issue, you do have to agree. And when you just look at the data, the current data right now, our border policies are failing miserably. The elections part, no, that's cat, man. All the data indicates that our elections are pretty much secure. Are they perfect? No. But for any, quote unquote, miscounts or, votes that were somehow counted twice or, whatever the excuse is, um, that amount of error isn't even enough to shift the outcome of the election. So our elections are pretty secure, but our border is not. So I do agree with him on that.
When I spoke in front of Brad Rathensberger, who again last week.
I mean, it's crazy, right? You have migrants from Asia, from China, and West Africa popping up on our southern border. Like, that's insane.
Said I didn't do anything wrong.
Well, it
Brad
sounded like you were
Rathensberger
asking for him to
said
come
it
up
was
with
a negotiation.
11,000 votes.
No, and you know that. You're terrible when you say this. You're off to a bad start because what I said was very simple. I got cheated in this election.
He told you,
And all I need is like 11,000, whatever the number was.
Brad
I got cheated
Raffensperger,
in
who's
the
a
election.
Republican, said you didn't get
Well, he
cheated.
said that, but we have to go and see. You know, there's some court cases out there. We want to go into Fulton County and we want to see the real votes. And it's so hard.
He said they looked into it. The election had been
They can
certified
look into
3
it. I don't
times.
want them. I want to look into it. I
Mr.
would say
President,
that
the
if we got
election had been
access to the votes, which we're close to getting in court,
The election has been certified 3 times. But my boy, he doesn't want to hear it, I guess.
as you know, if we got access to those votes, if we look in, you will find numbers that you wouldn't believe. More importantly, though, let me just say this.
I want to get through this, Mr. President.
Kristen, you
so
have
we
to just
can
hear me
get
out for
to
1
the
second.
Foreign policy section.
We had, because you say something and then you want to go into the next subject. We had many people in the line. When I said, I spoke for an hour. I knew that many people were in the line. I knew that it was I happen to be a really smart person. Who is going to be talking badly when I have lawyers and many other people on the line? Nobody's going to say something bad. But if it was bad, why didn't they say, sir, that was very inappropriate of you to say? Nobody said that. Nobody said, sir. It was only a long time after the call that somebody said, oh, maybe he said something wrong.
They said, sir, there's no evidence.
This is a hoax,
that it's
just like
been
Russia,
rigged.
Russia, just like Ukraine.
He
There's
doesn't
a
want to
hoax.
listen.
Let me tell you, I spoke to them on the phone and it was left, I think, something to the effect, okay, we'll get together tomorrow. Nobody said, sir, you shouldn't speak. If I said something incorrect, one of the lawyers for the state of Georgia, which I love, one of those lawyers would have said, sir, you have to take that back. That's an inappropriate
statement. The Republican Secretary
Nobody
of State said there was no evidence to fraud. He said he'd looked into it. The election had been.
The Republican Secretary of State, and he said he looked into it. I wonder what he's going to say now.
certified 3 times
You're
when you made
talking
that
about
call.
a different subject. If I said something wrong on the call, he or one of his many lawyers that were on the call would have said, it's inappropriate what you just said. No,
You lost, man. You lost. Just get over it. You lost an election. And now you're drumming up people's energies and you're getting people crazy because now you got a bunch of people out here believing that somehow the election was stolen. I mean, you have educated people. He said he does love the poorly educated, but he also has an educated demographic that is supporting this craziness. So this is just insane to me that he's so he just doesn't like to lose, and I understand that, but the country is bigger than you, man.
nobody said that. We had a normal phone call.
They said there's
This
no
became-
evidence of fraud.
He also said, I did nothing wrong last week.
Do you have any regrets about that call?
No,
Whatsoever.
None whatsoever.
No regrets
I
to
called
find
to
votes.
complain about an election,
Okay.
and I have every right to do that.
Let
Would
me-
you say? Do you think I have a right to complain about an election?
You have a right to take your case to court, which you did 60 times.
No,
And
I
you
didn't do
didn't
60
win.
times. They wouldn't hear it based on all sorts of crazy. They wouldn't hear. We never got a trial. Judges would look at stuff, say, "I'm not getting involved." They didn't want to get involved.
Let's keep moving so we get through.
If
all
you
of
take a
this.
look at the evidence, we have so much evidence. If you take a look at the evidence, even you, I could convince.
You were going to hold that press conference, but you never did with the evidence.
No, because I'm using it in my court case instead.
Okay. I want to ask you about the case related to Mar-a-Lago. A new charge suggests you asked a staffer to delete security camera footage so it wouldn't get into the hands of investigators. Did you
It's
do
false.
that? It's
Totally
false.
But let me tell you what
Would you
else.
testify
Let
to
me
that
tell you-
under
sure,
oath?
I'll testify.
You
to that.
testify to that under
Look,
oath?
It's a
Okay.
fake charge by this deranged lunatic prosecutor who lost in the Supreme Court 9-0, and he tried to destroy lots of lives. He's a lunatic. So it's a fake charge. But more importantly, the tapes weren't deleted. In other words, there was nothing done to them. And they were my tapes. I could have fought them. I didn't even have to give them the tapes, I don't think. I think I would have won in court. When they asked for the tapes, I said, sure, they're my tapes. I could have fought them. I didn't even have to give them. Just so you understand, though, we didn't delete anything. Nothing was deleted.
So that's false. The people who
Well,
testified. to
number
that-
one, the statement is false. Much more importantly, when the tapes came, and everybody says this, they weren't deleted. We gave them 100%.
Let's,
And just so you know, I offered them. I said, if you want to look at tapes, you can look at them.
let's move on to January 6th and the allegations that you tried to subvert the election. And again, I just want to give you a chance to talk about this because voters want to hear about this. The most senior lawyers in your own administration and on your campaign told you that after you'd lost more than 60 legal challenges, that it was over. Why did you ignore them and decide to listen
60 legal challenges. Come on, man.
to a new outside group? of
Because I didn't
attorneys?
respect them.
You'd
as
hired them.
lawyers, sure, but that doesn't mean, you hire them, you never met these people, you get a recommendation, they turn out to be right.
Yeah, I hired them, but I don't respect them. I would never want to be hired by somebody that doesn't respect me. That's kind of a weird thing to say.
I know that they turn out to be not so good. In many cases, I didn't respect them, but I did respect others. I respected many others that said the election was rigged. Look, we have many people, and it's my choice. I happen to know that the election was rigged. Okay, I know it because I have there's so much proof of ballot stuffing. It's amazing. Right just a little while ago, in terms of the modern history, where the 51 intelligence agents said very specifically, they lied. They all lied. And they said about the laptop that it was Russia disinformation. That was a lie. That had a huge impact on the election. In fact, the pollsters say over 10 points. I didn't need 10 points. I needed 1/10 of a point. If you take a look at the
It's fair.
Twitter files with the FBI and Twitter dealing, that had a huge impact on the election. Just those things. But in addition to
When you
that,
say you
you
needed,
have ballot stuffing, you have a lot of
when
other
you
things.
say you needed 1/10 of a point, you needed
1/10
1/10 of a
I
point
needed a very
to
small. I
win?
think somebody said 22,000 votes.
to win,
Yeah. If you divide it among the states, it was 22,000 votes, something to
To-
that effect. Yeah.
to win the election.
Yeah. If I would have had another 22,000 votes over the whole,
But
Look, they rigged the
is-
election. If you look at
But
Pennsylvania,
Mr.
if
President,
you
you're
look at
saying you
all this
needed more
stuff,
votes to win the election. Are you
Excuse me.
acknowledging you
if
didn't
you
win?
if you look at all of the statistics, all of the
Got him. Got him. He just admitted that he needed what 22,000 or whatever more votes. I don't know, buddy. He kind of got caught slipping.
votes, they say 22,000 votes, over millions and millions of votes, 22,000 votes. So when they do Twitter files, or when they have 51 intelligence agents come out and lie that the laptop from hell was Russia disinformation, and now they find out it's not. But they knew that at the time. They cheated on the election in that way too.
I just want to be clear, though. Are you saying you needed those votes in order to win? Are you acknowledging you didn't win?
I'm not acknowledging. No, I say I won the election.
Okay. Even though, again, your lawyers told you.
And to be fair, when you're pushing the whole Russia hoax, that did affect a lot of people's minds about who they're gonna vote for. So when certain stories are being spread, I mean, of course, it's gonna have an impact on the way that people vote. So I do have to give him credit here. He's not wrong.
You did not.
No.
Did you just let me
Some
understand?
people told me that,
Okay.
but many people told me the opposite.
You called some of your outside lawyers. You said they had crazy theories. Why were you listening to them? Were you listening to them because they were telling you what you wanted to hear?
You know who I listened to myself? I saw what happened. I watched that election and I thought the election was over at 10 o'clock in the evening.
You were listening to your instincts.
My instincts are a big part of it. That's been the thing that's gotten me to where I am, my instincts. But I also listen to people. There are many lawyers. I could give you many books. There are books that are written on how the election was rigged. There are numerous books that were written on how the election was
Just
rigged.
to be clear, were you listening to your lawyer's advice or were you listening to your own instincts?
I was listening to different people. And when I added it all up, the election was rigged. There are books
Were you
that are
calling the
written.
shots, though?
In fact, Molly Hemingway wrote a great book.
But were you
called
calling the
Rigged.
shots ultimately?
Excuse me. Molly Hemingway,
Mhm.
who's highly respected and great, she wrote a book, a best-selling book called Rigged.
Were you calling the shots, though, Mr. President, ultimately?
As to whether or not I believed it was rigged, oh, sure. It was my decision, but I listened to some people. Some people said that. Like guys like Bill Barr, he was a stiff, but he wasn't there at the time. But he didn't do his job because he was afraid. You know what he was afraid of? He was afraid of being impeached. He was petrified to be impeached. And how do you not get impeached? Don't do anything.
We've heard so much, Mr. President, about that day, the actual day of January 6th from other people. But quite frankly, we haven't heard from you about your own perceptions of how that day unfolded. We've heard you talk about the rally. And I'm curious about what happened when you got back to the White House. I know you spent most of the day in the dining room. What were you doing in there? How were you watching it unfold?
So let me just tell you about January 6th. First of all, I had very little to do with January 6th. I was asked to
Come
speak.
on.
And I was the president of the United States. I'm allowed to do that. But I was asked to speak. Other groups, I think it was women's groups, a lot of people were involved in that. And it was incredible. It was incredible. It was, I think, the largest group I've ever spoken. You never see that. You never see pictures of the group that I was speaking to. I think it was the most people I've spoken to some very large groups. Hundreds of thousands of people were there. And it was a beautiful, beautiful sight. But just so you understand, I went and I spoke. And by the way, peacefully and patriotically, and all of that, which wasn't reported. But when I spoke, I have had senators go up. They said, I've never heard you speak so moderately. You were very moderate.
What happened when you got back to the White House?
Well,
then,
wait,
Mr.
let me
President?
just say. So I spoke. And then I went back. I wanted to go down peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol. Secret Service, who I have great respect for, said, sir, it's better if you don't do that. It could be unsafe because they didn't mean because of riots, because, it takes one guy with bad intentions, okay? So I didn't have a dispute with them. You had that one person said, I grabbed the man around the neck. Actually, I wish I was so strong to be able to do that. These are all tough guys, smart guys.
Dispute that account.
Dispute it? Who wouldn't dispute it? She's the craziest account I've ever heard. You mean that I was in the Beast? And she said, I was in the Beast. And the Secret Service didn't win. So I took a guy who was like a black belt in karate and grabbed his neck and tried to choke him.
What happened?
How ridiculous. Just so you understand. And I have great respect for Secret Service, by the way.
Great
They're
respect.
fantastic.
Great
The Secret
respect.
Service said, sir, it would be better if you did. And I said, I'd love to do it. They said it would be better until we went back to the White House. Just so you understand, I spoke, I made a very nice speech. I wasn't Maxine Waters that calls for people's death and some of these. Take a look at what these other people say.
Shout out to
So where
Maxine
got to the White
Waters.
House, though? Where did you watch all
Well,
of
let
the
me tell you,
events
much
unfold?
more importantly, I offered 2 days before, 2 or 3 days before, 10,000 soldiers, right? And they were going to go because everybody was telling me, I knew it was going to be big in terms of the crowd because everybody I spoke to said, hey, I'm going down on January 6th. I'm going down. I'm going to listen to your speech, etc. And there were other speakers. I wasn't the only speaker. There were many speakers. But wait a minute. I offered 10,000 people to the mayor of Washington, D.C., Nancy Pelosi, both of them, Nancy Pelosi and to the mayor of Washington. And they turned it down flat. And the police commissioner was very nasty about it to her. And he testified. And here's what happened. The January 6th unselect committee of thugs and horrible people, the unselect committee destroyed all the evidence.
They
Did you
say
know
they
that?
didn't do that. We did ask them. We did ask the January 6th committee.
Well, they announced
They
that
said
they
they didn't
destroyed
do
and
that.
deleted most of the evidence.
They say some of the evidence is still under review. I want to know what.
Wait.
I want to know about your perspective, Mr.
Wait,
President.
Kristen,
I want to
they
ask
put out
about
an
you, though.
announcement that they destroyed the evidence. And they destroyed all the stuff having to do with Nancy Pelosi, and they wouldn't let her testify.
Now that does
We
sound a
said,
little
why isn't
odd.
she testifying? You know, it was a whole rigged deal. Why isn't she testifying? I offered them 10,000
Mr.
soldiers. She
President,
turned them.
I want to know
You
what
know that
you
she's in
did on
charge of
that day.
security.
I want to know. You're the president of the United
Kristen,
States. Though.
she's
What
in
did you-
charge of
Tell me how
security.
you watched this all unfold. Were you in the dining room watching TV?
I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell people later at an appropriate time, just so you understand.
Why?
However,
What did you
Why?
And I
do in
made
the
beautiful-
That's
Capitol?
weird. That's weird. Just tell us where you were when the rebellion was unfolding. Where were you at? And the fact that you don't want to answer that's kind of weird. I mean, maybe some of you know the reason why. I mean, I would love to know, but that's kind of weird.
Capitol was
statements.
under attack, though.
Let me
Mr.
just tell
President.
you.
In the moment that the Capitol
Did you
was
see
under
the
attack.
statements I made in the Oval Office and just outside of the Oval Office?
Absolutely, I
Go
was there
home.
that day.
Our police are great. We love our police. We love everybody. Go home.
That was
This was
that
a
was
beautiful
that was at
statement.
4
Well, that
o'clock in the
statement was
afternoon,
made-
more than
I don't know.
3
but
hours after the
But there were
attack
tweets
started.
that were
Mr.
put out
President.
before that.
I want to know who you
By the
called
way,
on that day.
Nancy Pelosi.
I
I
wanna
don't
talk
have.
about
Why
that
would
day.
I tell you that? Listen,
Don't want
Nancy
to talk about
Pelosi
that.
was in charge of security. She turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't turn down the soldiers, you wouldn't have had January 6th.
Did you call military or law enforcement?
What?
Did you call military or law enforcement at the moment the Capitol
I'm
was
not going
under
to tell you
attack?
anything. Let me put it this way. I behaved so well. I did such a good job. Nancy Pelosi turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't do that,
But
and now
Nancy
I understand.
Pelosi doesn't have
I
the authority
understand
that
the
you
police
have as
testified
commander in
against.
chief, though.
Yeah, like this guy's just always shifting blame to someone else. It's funny.
Listen to me, Kristen. Listen to me. I understand that the police testified against her, the chief very strongly against her, Capitol Police, great people. They testified against her and they burned all the evidence. Okay, they burned all the evidence.
Mr.
They
President,
destroyed all the evidence about Nancy Pelosi.
what do you say to people who wonder why you as commander in chief, you have authorities that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have as
No,
commander in
she
chief?
has authority over
Why
the
didn't
Capitol.
you send help in that moment, though?
Hmm.
Frankly, just so you understand, I assumed that she took care of it. She turned down.
So when you realized that the National Guard wasn't coming,
Well,
when
you don't
help wasn't
realize
coming?
anything until quite a while. National Guard not
What?
coming. I asked it to be there 3 days in advance, and she turned it down.
She says that request was never officially made.
Oh,
just
stop
so
it.
you know.
Let
Let
me
me-
just tell you.
Let me ask you
The
about
mayor of
pardons,
let me
Mr.
tell you.
President.
The mayor of DC gave us a letter saying that she turned
It's
it
not an interview, it's a
Yeah, we
staring
have-
contest.
Nancy Pelosi also was asked, and she turned it down. The police commissioner
talking
of
about the
Capitol
day of,
Police,
though.
wait a minute,
Yep.
Capitol Police said that he wanted it, and Nancy Pelosi wouldn't accept it. She's responsible for January
Let's-
6th.
Mr. President.
Nancy
Oh,
Pelosi's
come
responsible.
on.
Mr.
And the
President, you're the
J6
president,
committee
though. You have
refused to interview
You have
her.
authorities that no one else has as the commander in chief. Do you think you showed leadership on that day?
Yes, absolutely, I did.
No,
And I showed
no.
calm.
No.
Nancy Pelosi is responsible for the security, and she did a terrible job.
Looking
by the way,
forward,
From what I understand, they burned all the evidence.
okay, she says she never got an official request. They say they
Oh,
didn't,
she's
but that's
so-
what you're saying.
Oh, really?
Let's talk about
And her
Man, at the end of the day, you know, just like the reporter says, you're the president. Full stop. You're the president, man. So you need to show leadership. You're the president. Don't blame Nancy Pelosi. Don't blame somebody else. I mean, isn't that like a super mantra on the conservative side? Like accountability, right? Accountability, accountability, accountability. Jordan Peterson, he talks about that a lot. Can't just blame others for your issues.
daughter taping
Let's
her. Her
talk
daughter
about-
happened to be a
let's
documentary.
talk about potential
documentary
pardons.
worker just happened to be there
Let's-
taping her at the time.
Let's talk about potential pardons because a lot of your supporters are wondering about that. Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio was sentenced to 22 years
Oof.
in jail. Now that you know what the sentence is, 22 years
Yeah.
in jail, will you give him a pardon? Will
Are
you
you
give
ready?
other Proud Boys a
I
pardon?
don't know him. I never met him. I never heard of him until I started reading this
Will you
stuff.
pardon him?
But
Lies.
I want to tell you, he and other people have been treated horribly. Antifa kills people, and those guys didn't even get tried in many cases.
There's no
They
evidence
put
that
these
he's-
guys
What?
in jail for 17, 18, and 22 years. They didn't kill anybody. Some of them never even went into the Capitol. Some of them weren't even in DC, and they got a 22 or a 17-year.
That's a lie. Some of them weren't even in DC and they were thrown in jail. Okay. If anybody can find a case where there was somebody that was not in DC and they were charged and thrown in jail for 17 years or 22 years, please message me. I'd love to see that because that's just straight up lies. That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, he's talking about how Joe Biden lies and he does lie. But I mean, this guy has lied multiple times in this interview, right? So I don't know. What do you guys think? I think it's a shame that he's not taking accountability. But hey, what can you do, right? Leave a comment down below.